thank you very much for coming to this month's Charity Marketing Peer Support Group. We're talking about rebranding. So let me just go through what we're going to talk about. As we were putting it together, I realized this could have been a whole day session, but we have an hour. So what we're going to do is whistle through it, but please feel free to ask questions when they occur to you, because they might not be relevant later. What I'm going to suggest is if you press the little button to raise your hand on the screen, or physically raise your hand, Alison's going to be keeping an eye out and she can nudge me and let me know that somebody wants to ask a question, and then we'll, no question is too stupid, because you honestly just don't know what you don't know, and rebranding is a process very few people go through until they have to go through it. So feel free to ask questions, but we're going to talk about why you might want to rebrand. Is it right for you to rebrand? How to choose that agency to help you? How to get everybody on board internally? You might want to do some research. You might be looking to change your name. You'll probably be looking to change your look and feel. You might be doing some key messaging. You'll want to keep everyone up to date, apply the brand, launch, and then after the launch and the evaluation. So we're going to go through kind of every stage of the process, and I am very happy, there we go, I'm very happy to introduce Lynne to you. So Lynne is the Chief Exec of what was Cheshire Centre for Independent Living, and we worked with them to rebrand to Disability Positive. We probably started 2.5 years ago, Lynne?
Yeah, something like that, Jo, for sure. Yeah, about 2019, definitely.
And we launched 12 months ago, almost exactly, because of COVID. It was supposed to launch earlier and we just had to sit on it because it was absolutely not the right time during the pandemic. So Lynne, we're going to do this as a double header, so you'll hear it from kind of my point of view as the agency, but more importantly you'll hear it from Lynne's point of view as a CEO leading her organisation through a rebrand and having all those conversations with the board and that kind of thing. And I was never in the room for those, so I'm quite fascinated to hear how that went as well. Do you want to just explain about the organisation and your connection to them, Lynne, your history with them?
Yeah, so hi everyone, it's lovely to see you all. I've worked here for nearly 20 years, so that doesn't make it sound too bad either, does it? I've not been in the same role for 20 years, I might add, but I've been involved with the organisation for close on 20 years now. And Disability Positive provide services, opportunity and voice to people with lived experience of disability and long-term health conditions and their families. So we work right across children through to adulthood. And yeah, the journey that we went on was to ultimately make it clear about who we are and what we do. Brilliant.
Thank you. And I'll just say, if you're ever putting signage up and you have a massive sign, take the opportunity to have a picture with it, because that's what we were doing here. And look how sunny it was. It was lovely. So first of all, why might you want to rebrand? So from a brand manager point of view, and that was my background. So for 7 years, I worked at R&ID and I was design manager and brand manager. And there are three main reasons why, as an organisation, you might want to rebrand. The first is that the world has moved on. So my boss at R&ID used to be director of comms at the Spastic Society, and they rebranded. And I don't think any of us need to realise why they had to rebrand. That word had just become something that they didn't want to be associated with anymore, and they became Scope and have done very well under the brand of Scope. So that's one very obvious reason why you might want to rebrand. The second thing is that the charity has moved on. So we rebranded a few years ago a local charity called Climb, and that stood for Children Living with Inherited Metabolic Disorders. It's not exactly an anagram, but it had been shortened to Climb over the years, and they had this kind of DNA helix which looked a bit more like a ladder. But the big thing for them was they weren't just helping children anymore, which was kind of where the name had come from and what the understanding of the organisation was. Because medical advancements had moved on, people were living with these conditions, so they were more often than not helping adults. So the name just didn't say what they did anymore, and we rebranded them to Metabolic Support UK, which was much more relevant to the organisation that they were at the time. And then the third one, and possibly my favourite, is that design has moved on. So NatSpec, which still are the National Association for Specialist Colleges, just had a very old-fashioned logo. They were embarrassed about it. The chief exec would go to meetings and sit with very high-level government officials and would be very embarrassed about what they looked like. So they needed to look a lot more professional in their sector in order to be taken seriously. And I would say those are the three main reasons that you need to rebrand. Feel free to shout out any others if you can think of it. Merger would be the only other one. Obviously, if a couple of different organisations are coming together, we saw that famously with the kind of age sector a few years ago when Age Concern and Help the Aged came together to form Age UK. That would be another reason when you want to bring together a couple of different organisations. But is it right for you to rebrand? Lynne, what kind of was the things that happened to get you to the point where you thought this isn't working for us anymore?
I think for us, marketing had always been the poor relation as a charity, and that's really honest. So, you know, you'd look at your budget every year, and a lot of the services we deliver are public service contracts, with some income generation directly through individuals. But you're always cutting the cloth, and you'll all know what that feels like. So marketing always felt like the poor relation. So we'd never really invested any money into it. This was inherited. It was the name that was in place when I started as the chief exec about 12 years ago. And yeah, it felt amateurish. I think it was actually one of our staff members who designed the logo, actually, from memory, because we'd actually rebranded previously, believe it or not, from Cheshire Disabilities Federation to Cheshire Centre for Independent Living, which I think we did in about 2003. But what started this process, actually, it wasn't so much that I thought we needed a new logo or a new brand, actually, but it was, we asked JG Creative to do a brand audit for us, which is what started the journey. So that was in 2019. That was an excellent piece of work that really helped inform and give us some really honest feedback from a professional's experience in terms of what they sort of saw in the logo, in our material. So what was in our marketing strategy, what we'd claimed were our USPs, who our audiences were, and they were just really, really honest. And Jo wrote a report that gave us lots and lots of food for thought. So that's absolutely what started our journey. So recognising, I think, that marketing shouldn't be the poor relation, and actually you do need to invest in it to be able to make sure that you can reach the people that you're there to support ultimately. So marketing is crucial for that. And then that brand audit. So they're the two main things, I think, Jo, in terms of what started that process.
Thank you. I think I would always be nervous about any charity that says they need to rebrand unless they've really thought about it, because it's not quick, it's certainly not cheap, and it takes the whole organisation's focus for quite a long time sometimes. So if anything can be done to reinvigorate what's there already, then that would always be my first go-to. But I think with CCIL, I think it was just the name. Some people called it Cheshire Centre for Independent Living, some people called it CCIL, but when you phoned and someone picked up the phone, more often than not they'd say hello Cecil. So they'd even created a word out of the anagram. And there was definitely that misconception that the key to independent living, it made it look like it was a managed independent supported living organisation, which was absolutely not one of the services that you provide. No. So there was misconception there as well, wasn't there? Quite a lot.
And we're not a centre, so most of our work is done through outreach, so we're not a centre either.
Yeah. Catherine, you had a question.
I actually don't have a question, I just have a comment for Lynne. So I live in Cheshire East, I live in Alsager, and my son is now 7, as you heard before, Down syndrome and autism. And at the time when he was born, we were advised to get in touch with Cheshire Centre for Independent Living because you used to do the EHIPs at the time. And I'll be honest about your name, when I saw it, I was like, I don't understand why they're referring me to the Cheshire Centre for Independent Living when I have a 6-month-old. So, and so just to say about your new name, if someone has said, oh, you need to speak to Disability Positive, I would be like, oh, right, great, there's someone who can help me. But Cheshire Centre for Independent Living, I just didn't understand it. So I just thought I'd feed that back while I thought about it and saw what you'd done. Amazing, well done.
Oh,
thanks, Catherine. That makes it all worthwhile. Yeah, thank you.
it definitely does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we love it. We love it now. Yeah, you feel proud to come to work.
Oh. I think we've lost. Oh, there we go. It's just playing up a little bit. Your Zoom, Lynne, you're back. Picking the right support. I felt awkward putting this in here, but I asked Lynne if she would mind talking about just how you pick the right person to help you, because it might be something you don't have the people internally to do. And even when I was at R&ID, although we had quite a big design team, we chose to use an external agency to help us with bigger things like this, because they have that benefit of an external point of view. Now, Lynne and I had met when she came to do my radio show, which some of you have also been on. But you went through a proper process, didn't you? I just put the tendering process kind of headlines on the screen to remind us, really.
Yeah, so that's obviously part of our financial and financial controls policy, obviously looking at the value, and we knew the value would be of an amount that we would need to go out to a request for quotation. So obviously those were the key questions to us. So who would we be working with, and what experience have they got? What experience have they got with working with comparable charities? Because that was really important to us. Because I think there is a difference. The fact that Jo's background is with the R&ID, it's something that's really close to my heart anyway, because of my personal experience having deaf parents who use BSL, but also my own lived experience as someone who has a disability and a long-term health condition. But I think that experience of working with comparable charities, with the examples in terms of the changes that were made and the reasons why those happened, I think that was really insightful to see and really helped make the decision. The fact that they understood what we were trying to achieve, even if they didn't necessarily agree that we were doing the best to show who we were and what we do, and then obviously how much it was going to cost, which was obviously another factor. But in terms of the weighting, I think we did a 60% quality weighting and 40% price. So actually it was the quality that was more important to us than the money.
It was only 30% price, actually. When I went back,
sorry,
and looked, it was 70% quality.
Well done.
Yeah. Even better.
Even better. So and we basically sent this, we believe in kind of buying local as much as possible. So we didn't send it any further afield than the Northwest, because we covered Cheshire and parts of the Northwest. So we didn't send it any wider than Northwest, but we sent it to Jo, because we knew Jo from the radio show, and obviously she'd done the brand audit for us as a separate piece of work, and it's the brand audit that led to this process. And we sent it to another 4 firms across the Northwest. So we sent it out to 5 organisations. We got a response from 3 of those, and then we obviously shortlisted on paper based on those responses, and we were able to make a decision on paper because there was enough information in there. And yay, JG Creative were successful in being awarded that contract. So yay, good. It was good for us. Yeah, it was a good match.
Yeah, and I think from an agency point of view, the fact that the request for tender was so structured was an absolute gift, because so often you're asked a quote and it's so woolly, you don't know quite what to write. And I know from being on the other side of it and getting all the proposals in, if they're all very different, it's really hard to assess like for like. And so if you have this kind of process where it's very rigid and you know what you're asking and we know what we have to deliver, then it makes that kind of assessment process that much easier and fairer. So, I mean, writing the proposal of how the objectives will be delivered in 1,000 words is probably one of the biggest challenges I've ever had. But it definitely made me be succinct and just keep it to the bare minimum, you know, to the facts, which was
welcome
good.
to the world of public sector tendering, though, because you want to see what they expect as a response to some of the questions, and they give you like a tiny word count. But I think the other thing that I'd add is the brand audit. I can't stress how important that was, because not only was that helpful to us to really open our eyes to how other people may perceive Cheshire Centre for Independent Living, but shamelessly, it was great to just completely nick all of the recommendations that Jo had given us to use that as the objectives for the purpose of the request for quotation. So actually it was really useful for a relatively small cost to get a brand audit, and then be able to use that to build the request for quotation was really helpful. It didn't stop anyone else going for it, of course, and we did send it to 5. It's just that ultimately, I suppose, you know, JG Creative already knew us because they've gone through that process, and that really helps in terms of the scoring difference really between the different providers. But I think that was really helpful because we set the objectives in terms of what we wanted to achieve.
Apologies, I clicked the wrong thing. Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions about the kind of pitching process? I'm sure if you did have any questions, even in the future, myself or Lynne would be happy to chat to you as well if you think of anything afterwards.
And if anyone was going through the process and they didn't have it in the small, and a copy of our request for quotation as help, I wouldn't have an issue with sharing that. If somebody was starting from a blank page, I wouldn't have an issue with sharing anything if it helped another organisation.
Brilliant, thanks, Lynne. This is another question for you, really. How, when you'd done the brand audit, did that help you also get the trustees on board and start thinking about that this would be the right next step for your organisation?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the trustees are always very interesting, and I say that because I'm a director and trustee for some organisations as well. But I think trustees are very interesting, and what drives them will be very, very different. So you'll all be dealing with that, but obviously how you approach it, you're kind of having to read the room and seeing what's going down well and what isn't, and maybe just adjust the argument. Essentially, from doing the brand audit, it was kind of within my financial authority to be able to take it forward to look at the request for quotation, because it wasn't until we got those responses that we would look at it. But the board, it was quite easy to get the board to agree to the request for quotation, and they completely understood the reasons that we would do that, because at that stage we knew that we needed to maybe look at another name, because that was quite clear, because that had come up very clearly in the brand audit about the fact that our name didn't say who we were. But I think even then it was maybe about looking at the logo for Cheshire Centre for Independent Living to see if we could do something with that. It was later that we sort of thought, actually, do you know what, we probably do need to change our name. But that didn't come out until the market research bit that was carried out. That's when the name change came. But the original request for quotation was around looking at being clearer about who we were and what we do, and getting those key messages right, because it was very amateurish, you know, all of our leaflets were put together by somebody different within the organisation, and that's because we had no marketing budget. So getting somebody coming in just to look at that, so it feels like it's been written by one voice, but getting everybody on board, no resistance at all to the request for quotation. It was more as we got further down the line, Jo, which I don't think were there.
Well, I think, yeah, from my point of view, I guess, when we were given the job, I was asked to come and speak at the board meeting, just to introduce ourselves, I thought. And it was quite a challenging meeting. There were quite a lot of people who wanted to, quite a lot of the trustees wanted to understand the return on investment that we were going to bring by doing this piece of work. So I think there was definitely an education there, maybe, with some of the board about that. It was about clarity of communication. It wasn't about a financial return on investment. You would get that, but it was more about the fact that every piece of work, every time you communicated, it would be clearer and you would be getting your message across better. Do you remember that meeting? I think it was probably more traumatic for me than it was for you.
That felt probably a bit later, Jo. I think that
Oh,
was
right,
probably
okay.
I think that was after the market research had been carried out and you came
Right.
to present those findings. And
Right.
then after that, that led to a business case. So how I got everyone on board was ultimately, we have a fairly robust and in line with good governance guidelines, a business case that we have to present, which would outline what the background is, what the research is, and the research was all about the brand audit plus the market research that Jo had carried out. It also covered what professional opinion was, if that was relevant, and then options and risks associated. So, you know, rebrand, and it was about changing our name, what the advantages, disadvantages and risks were, don't do it, and then obviously what the financial outlay would be, and how we would mitigate the risks. So it was quite a detailed business case. It's about seven pages, but that was unanimously supported by the trustees. So I think sometimes they got the presentation and I think they definitely shouted out about what will the return on investment be, and we thought, well, that was quite hard to tell because we've not really started yet. Actually is the first point, but it wasn't about that. But I think once they'd had that presentation and then they got the business case and they could see it written down, process it and understand it, they understood that it was a kind of no-brainer, to coin a phrase, and that we needed to do it and we needed to change our name. So they unanimously agreed our new name from the shortlist that we put to them.
Yeah, and you were so good at keeping them, giving them the information they needed at every point to keep them up to date and enable them to make informed decisions. Definitely, you're right. That was slightly later, and I think that the challenge was probably because essentially the brief had changed following the market research, and it was now going to be a bigger piece of work.
Yeah.
So as Lynne said, the first thing we did was brand research, and to do that, we really needed to understand who all the key audiences were. And also whose voice was most important, because one of the things I very much learned at R&ID is, when you do the brand research, different groups of people will have different opinions, and it helps to understand before you get the responses back whose voice is going to be given the most weighting, whose is most important in order to enable you to achieve your objectives. Because once you've got the results back, your own natural bias to what you want to do will maybe make you put one audience above another. So it's really important to kind of agree beforehand who the most important audience is, and then also make sure you can get that research out to enough of each of those audiences to get a statistically significant response back. And the things you want to think about with brand research is, what do you need to know? How are you going to gather the information? There are two different types of research, qualitative and quantitative. So quantitative is a survey. It's literally about quantity of responses. So it's asking lots of questions. You can do surveys online, you can do surveys in paper. There are plenty of different ways to do that. And then qualitative is actually speaking to people. So that could be one-on-one interviews, either face-to-face or over the phone or over Zoom, or it could be focus groups, which is the kind of typical research groups that you see. If it depends what you're researching as to which one is most relevant. So if you're researching visuals, then you want to do that with people in a room where you can ask them their opinions and why they think about something, what they think about something. Doing that quantitatively on a survey isn't really going to work, because you want to find out people's why. It's not just a black and white yes or no question. Ideally, you always want to do both, and you might do it different ways around depending on what you want to know. So it might be that you do the quantitative first, so you do a big survey first, and then when the things fall out of that, you then run a focus group to ask more about the whys. Or you might want to do it the other way around. You really don't know where to start, so you run a focus group, and then the key themes that come out of there, you test them with a lot of people. So you can do it either way around, and it depends what you need to know. Who you want to ask and which audience is the most important, which I've just mentioned. And how will we engage audiences with the research? So for each of those different audiences, how are you going to get the research out to them? How are you going to get them to fill it in? and incentivizing it does come into that. It can be hard as a charity to incentivize. It does hugely up your response rate, but you also get slightly different people responding. So it depends who you want to engage with. What can help with any negative publicity about a charity incentivizing response is to say you've had a prize donated, or keep it a sort of relatively low value prize, like a £20 Amazon voucher will be given to one person who fills in, so there's a chance of winning something rather than guaranteed. With focus groups, if you want to engage with the general public, then you will always need to incentivize, because in order to recruit those people, the agencies that recruit them need an incentive. It's usually between £30 to £50 per person. And then you want to agree beforehand how many responses you want before you're happy to base any big changes on that information. And again, that will affect how you do the research and how much it costs in order to get that number of responses back. I've just put the very general kind of brand research brief that we did for Disability Positive. So we wanted to ask about demographics and where they were located, because we knew that Cheshire Centre for Independent Living was seen differently in different areas of Cheshire because they delivered different services in different areas. We also wanted to really test the word disabled. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get much clarity because like you would expect, everybody has a different relationship with that word. But we did find out a lot of interesting information about it as well. So we wanted to test the word disabled, the word awareness, and the word services, because we already knew that they were maybe things we would be using in descriptions of the organisation going forward. And then we wanted to understand kind of what they knew about them right now. So the name, the understanding of the organisation, the strapline, the logo, the potential. So we had a few potential names at this point. And it was more about the structure of names that we were testing and which words seemed to do better. Values, unprompted and prompted. Marketing, so we wanted to understand which channels people used and how often for the marketing planning we were doing going forward, and whether or not people had been to the website, and we tested out a few potential key messages. And then we also clarified how we were going to send it out. So I think when you're communicating a piece of brand research, look at all the people that you can talk to. So it might be your service users, you might have an email newsletter. Partners are really good as well. And we're doing a survey at the moment from the National Council of Women, and they partnered with loads of other organisations. So we've just asked them to put a banner with a link to the survey on their newsletters as well. That can be a good way to get it out. Don't forget your own staff, your volunteers, your trustees, for them to fill it out and also send to their friends and families if that's relevant. And then any large local employers that could send it on to their employees, because that's a whole nother group of people. Lynne sent out the emails to professionals that they worked with. It was promoted through their social media on the homepage of the website. And then we did an offline version as well for people who couldn't access the online version, or for people who needed their support workers to go through it with them. I didn't include the results of the research because obviously that's for you to know, Lynne, and you based your findings on the decisions that were made going forward. But was there anything in particular that you can remember that was really useful to know to push the project forward?
Yeah, I think what it told us, we've always been entrenched in the social model of disability. We still are, by the way. So we believe that people, you don't have a disability, you have an impairment, and actually you're disabled by society and the barriers that society put in place. And if you remove those, then actually I can do everything that you can do as a non-disabled person. Now, we still believe that, but I think what was really difficult for me as the chief exec was balancing that with actually the findings coming back with a lot of people, particularly those that didn't have a physical impairment, not identifying as disabled in the survey. So particularly people on the autistic spectrum, or with a learning difficulty, or with mental ill health, and various other impairments, all of which that we support as an organisation, weren't identifying as disabled, which is one of the key things that I think we took away, which is why when I introduced us in terms of the brand guidelines now, we use the term lived experience of disability and a long-term health condition. It's not because we don't still believe very strongly in the social model, it's because we realise that the people who use us already know about us. But if you're not going to type in disabled into a search function, you may be likely to type in disability support or something like that. So we knew that that would help us reach more people. So I think that was probably one of the key things that came out of it. So, and I think that's the same from those that were carers. So from family members, they didn't necessarily, if they'd filled it in on behalf of a child, for example, they wouldn't necessarily recognise their child as a disabled child. They would recognise them as living with X impairment or whatever it may be. So one of the key things that I think we changed, Jo, definitely was how we termed disabled people and made that shift to lived experience of disability and long-term health conditions.
Yeah, it was definitely disability versus disabled, and we saw a clear feedback on that. Thank you. So the next thing that came out of the research was the need to change the name, and we had a very clear brief for this following on. So clearly expressing who you are and what you do, being short, preferably only 2 words, ideally focused on people and not the disabled people, but people, not being too clever, have an available URL, which is not already in use in the UK, possibly the hardest one of all of them. We also looked at things that included Northwest or NW, and also acronyms were okay as long as they spelt out a relevant word. So my example from before, like climb, that doesn't work. It spells out a word, but it's not a relevant word. And the kind of process that we go through when we're doing name changes is to take that brief or the research results or both and create a long list. So we have an amazing copywriter who has a gift for creating names, and she'll do it under different headings. So we'll kind of brainstorm and think about all the different types of names that might be appropriate, and then she'll come up with different names under those and look at whether or not URLs are available and whether or not they're already being used. From that long list, we then work with Lynne to come down to a short list. And actually it was at that point, so the naming kind of came slightly before the research in this case. We researched some of those shortlisted names, and then that helped to make the final decision. And you actually came up with disability positive, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I think I was driving back from Nantwich actually, Jo, and
you called me and you had this epiphany. Yeah.
So yeah, that was it was interesting. But we put quite a few forward to the board, to our staff, to the focus group, and asked from the shortlist what they preferred, and the results were overwhelmingly disability positive. So yeah. I think it was a focus group of 19, and 11 preferred disability positive, 6 preferred disability action, and 2 preferred disability support. One of my favourites was no limits, which is one of the long listed suggestions, but I couldn't stop myself singing the song, so I thought that won't work. I'll never get any work done.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, it was funny when I went back to the long list, some of the other names that we'd come up with, because now disability positive sounds so natural. It's like, well, of course that's what it's called, but it is funny when you go back. So we decided that it would be disability positive, and then we could move into look and feel. And again, Lynne, I'm showing the 2 initial ideas, which were funny because we hadn't looked at them again since then. So the process of coming up with a new look and feel is, again, to take the brief, and in this case to take the results from the research as well, come up with a couple of initial concepts, get feedback from the client on those, take one route onto the next stage and make some changes for feedback again, and then get to final concepts for approval, create all the assets and the brand guidelines, and then start implementing it. That is the process for any any brand, although if you ask Catherine, because we're just doing this with her at the moment, it's taken a slightly different turn, because you came to us with a logo, didn't you? And you were like, we have a logo, but I know that's not the whole brand, because I've been listening very carefully at all the peer groups. So we need all the other stuff that goes around it, and that's fine. We can jump in obviously at whatever point. But that is generally the kind of process that we go through. So the brief in brief, which is how we started our initial feedback, there was a new name. We also wanted to think about disability icons, which is, to be honest, a whole set of work that we did alongside this brand that I just haven't been able to include for time reasons. But we got the chance to really think about how disability should be perceived, because that little icon of the man in the wheelchair is just not representative. 7% of people, disabled people, are in a wheelchair. It's just not representative of disability at all. And we got to come up with something else, but that I had to leave out, sadly.
You can download those from our website though for free. So you can have a look at them if you want to have a look at them.
Purple is known as the colour of disability, just like there's the pink pound and the grey pound. Purple is known as the colour of disability in this kind of sector. It's a pan disability charity, so it supports people with a whole range of disabilities, very clear values. And we needed to think in the branding about colour blindness and visual impairment to make sure that the brand was going to be accessible for everybody, because that's exactly who they're there to support. And it needed to work in print and online. So that was a very top line kind of reminder of the brief. We always love to start with Nikki, who's our creative lead, who's incredible, always starts with pen and paper. It's the quickest way to get lots and lots of ideas out. And we like to share that with clients, because that's the really exciting bit of the journey as well, when it's just a blank sheet of paper and you could literally do anything. So this is where disability positive branding started from. And this was the first idea that we presented. So briefed with a task to focus on the word positive rather than disability, we've ensured this takes up a larger proportion of the logo, sits in the foreground. The addition of a smile within the word positively enhances its friendly credentials and gives the viewer a visual cue. The name sits within an irregular shape, which conveys that we do not all neatly fit into one box, and we shouldn't be expected to. And I think for us, that was the bit we really loved too. It's strong, unapologetic, bold, but still friendly to communicate the supportive nature of the organisation. The font's gently rounded, but there's a good variety of letter shapes, because if you have the same letter shape, it's not very good for people with dyslexia. The colour purple is used, which is well known in the sector, but also it's visually got a very big contrast with white as well. And then we always present it back kind of in the sector. We'd researched kind of everybody else and what they look like to make sure it doesn't look too similar to anyone else's logo. We show what that looks like on potentially different pieces of printed material, what it could look like on the website, what it could look like on mugs and t-shirts, because I think just seeing a logo doesn't in any way give you the sense of whether it's going to work across everything that you want it to work on. And then we do a little roundup, and that was the colour palette that we were suggesting as well. So that was idea one we initially presented to Lynne. And then this was idea two. So it uses the idea that everyone is different and unique, and all disabled in different ways by society. The fan of different colours overlap and interact to reveal new colours. They also emanate from the positive sign, which replaces the T. Now, I hate to sign in front of Lynne because she signs much better than me, but I can sign. And one of the first things I tried to remember was what the sign was for disability positive, which is a sweep. I hope this is right now, Lynne. Sweeping your finger across your fingers and then making the positive sign. And that's kind of where that came from. And it's bold, bright, clear, still approachable, hinting at the caring and supportive nature of the organisation. And the black and white background ensures that the colours stand out. And again, we presented that across lots and lots of different things, just to show how we would take elements of the logo, like we did in the first idea, and use them across different materials. And I think that helps to really understand how the whole thing works. So that was idea two. And then I think the hardest bit of the whole process, the client has to decide which way to go. What were you thinking at this point, Lynne?
Well, and I'm sure Jo won't mind me sharing. So we shared idea 1 and 2 across the trustees and staff to get their input, and it was fairly close actually between the two. I personally preferred idea 1 to idea 2. Idea 2 reminded me, I loved it, and I love the colours. But it reminded me a little bit, sorry Jo, of My Little Pony, and I couldn't get that out of my head. And
Okay.
it also reminded me of Pride, and I wondered whether it would maybe give the impression that we were a disability charity that supported people in the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what moved me away. So I love the colours, but I thought, are people going to again make a different perception about the type of organisation if they saw the colours? And it just reminded me of the My Little Pony mane, which took me back to my childhood, which is lovely.
So you're singing No Limits while remembering My Little Ponies.
But I think it was fairly close, because some people definitely preferred the rainbow kind of effect. But in the end, across asking each of the 70 staff and getting the feedback from them plus our 11 trustees, the winner was, as you can tell, idea 1.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that just reinforces what Lynne was saying about asking all the staff. They were engaged with every stage of the process, and I can't praise that enough, because if suddenly one day you come into work and everything looks different and it's like, ta-da, look what we did, you might be a bit excited, but actually you just feel a bit left out as well. And suddenly your whole identity of your organisation that you care for, and I think especially for people who work in the not-for-profit and charity sector, they really care about what they do. It's not just a job. So that's all rocked quite a bit. And I think I said from the very beginning, we need to keep the staff on board from day one. And the fact you were so open to sharing everything with them, even when we were in lockdown and it wasn't that easy anymore, just showing things around the office, you know, huge credit to you, Lynne, for doing that.
We got some feedback on that option 1 though, didn't we, Jo, where just that it felt quite similar to some other logos, which is why that in the final version the smile colour is the lime green rather than the yellow. That was the only change.
Definitely. Yeah, we always do a Google search as well, where we put the logo in and do a visual search, and it brings back anything else. And I think one of your trustees also found another organisation that just had similar shapes and similar colours. There is no such thing as, you know, never been done before. So it's just about making sure that it's different enough that you can own that space. And I'll come on to the very final one in a second. The other big part of the visual look and feel for Disability Positive was photography. People with disabilities just aren't shown at all very often, and so finding stock photography was really difficult, and we knew we wanted to do a photo shoot, but COVID made that near impossible for quite a long time. So we knew we would have to balance stock photography, stock imagery with actual pictures, and some of those are luckily your Facebook page had some brilliant pictures, especially of the groups that you run, and we sort of chose our favorites from those that fit in with this kind of look that we wanted, and then you contacted them to see if we could use them. So the one bottom right is from the Buzz group, I think, or Good Company, and you know, we just wanted to make sure we were being really inclusive in our photography. And then, as Lynne said, they had to make their decision, and this is how we revised it. So it was mostly changing the colour palette and changing that colour from the yellow to green, because there were quite a few disability charities using purple already that had paired it with a yellow. So we wanted you to have complete ownership. And this is one of the photos that we took. So we did a photo shoot, and that's one of your lovely staff members. Because it wasn't rebranded at the time, you'll see in the background there's a logo in the photo. We just printed those out and laminated them. We're sticking them up in the background of all the shots we were taking, because this was way before we rebranded. But that was the final logo. This is in the brand guidelines. We also did a version of the logo that said the new name for Cheshire Centre for Independent Living that could be used initially, so that people didn't get confused. And we'll talk about the kind of launch and how we did the transition, but that was really important initially. And then we also created a We Are Disability Positive, because we wanted to capitalise on the fact that it tells people who you are. It was also your call to arms and your vision statement. So those times when you were only ever going to have just a logo, we wanted the chance for it to be a way of you introducing yourself as well. So in the signage and on somebody's, you know, as a partnership logo, etc. So we've got the We Are Disability Positive logo too. You can see the little icons bottom right as well that we created. And then the whole color palette, the shape.
It's amazing how quickly you memorize those, everybody. So I'm really good now going in typing
Violet.
in those.
Yeah. And the shape we brought in to use to hold images, that kind of thing. It can be used in any color as key lines, etc. Oh, this is the icon. So we realized that one size doesn't fit all. So we use the purple to highlight. And I love the fact they're all people, but they're all smiling. They're non-gendered. It's definitely not men. And we with Lynne's help, we highlighted what all the different types of disabilities were. So we've got an icon for hearing loss, visual impairment, physical disability, mental health, learning cognitive difficulty, and invisible hidden disabilities. And they're only ever to be used all together. They are a suite of 6. You wouldn't just use 1 or 2. And then we did a photo shoot, which was great. We got to meet some really, really lovely people. And we also looked at your key messages. So as well as how you look, that only gets you so far. You also need to explain really clearly who you are. And we did quite a lot of work on that as well. Here's more of the photos that we took. I think you were the most unwilling model, Lynne, out of everybody.
I absolutely hate it. Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing photos, but yeah, they were good. And I think we've used that one in our impact review this year, Jo. So yeah.
Great. Oh no, maybe Diane was the worst of everybody. She really wasn't happy to be photographed, but so lovely. I can't, is Andy the guy at the top? He was brilliant. Fantastic. He's really smiley. So the vision, our vision is a world that's disability positive. So we've got really, really clear who are we descriptions. And we also wrote the key messages for different audiences. So we have service user and carer explanations. We are disability positive. We help you to live well. And then we have messages for other people. We are disability positive. We help people with disability and long-term health conditions to live well. So they're very subtle changes, but very important changes. Have these been useful as well, Lynne?
Yeah, I mean, it's just our Bible essentially, and what we go to when we're describing ourselves to different audiences. And I think the key bit is we'd always talked about being user-led, because and that's probably our biggest USP, because we used to say run and controlled by and for disabled people, which probably doesn't mean a lot to people. So the fact that they came up with "we know it matters because we live with disability and long-term health conditions too" says the same thing, where it's much more friendly, and we are friendly and positive. So it's much nicer.
Yeah, absolutely. And even partnership, we love working with others who think like us. You know, there's ways to say it that, and I think, you know, that's the thing. Sometimes the way you kind of formally write it down is not the experience people have when they chat to you, and you really want those two things to match. We also wrote specific message about why we've changed your name, because again, when you're going out and explaining, and for the staff to use as well, sometimes you can get people who don't think that charities should rebrand. They think it's a waste of time, or they just really liked the old one and were quite attached to it, and they're not sure about why you've changed it. But this really helps, and it helps the staff to have a way of explaining it. And I like the sign-off line, "Now we're disability positive inside and out." And then we talked before about keeping people up to date, and it doesn't happen by accident. We had a really clear plan from the very beginning about who the different audiences were, when we would be communicating with them, and how. So staff, members, professionals, partners, and general public. So whether it was going to be throughout, and whether that was going to be the survey, opportunity to vote for a name, make a decision on a name, just before the launch day. So the week before the launch day, members got an email which showed them the new brand, reminded them of why they've changed, but mostly reassured them that their service wasn't going to change. Nothing else was going to change. Their contact was going to stay the same. And And the same with partners. They got an email from you, Lynne, a week before with a sneak peek of the brand, again explaining and reassuring, and then what everybody saw on launch day as well.
I think another key bit, just rewinding slightly, was obviously, should have mentioned, it's a really important factor as a charity, but the actual name change itself did go to our AGM for our members to make a decision. So although they'd not seen the brand, and this is right in terms of when we gave them the sneak preview, they'd actually signed off on the name change. That's a really important point, because it wasn't just the trustee decision, it was a member's decision.
Yeah, and that depends on the kind of structure of your organisation and your voting, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that needed to happen. And then we applied the brand to everything, and these are all the kind of things you might want to think about. So your website, your leaflets, your signage, your promo items, also directories, anywhere that you are in directories or on other people's websites. They're all the things that you tend to forget about. Redoing your photography, your social media plan, etc., etc. As I said before, we did a big photo shoot. This is Sarah, our photographer, taking pictures at CCIL before. This was before COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it looks completely different in reception now.
It does, yeah. You'll see in a second. We created new leaflets. We did some merchandise, so bags and staff outfits, because some staff are out delivering services, so they wear branded uniforms. And then we did the big launch, and this was brilliant. We were very hands-on, weren't we, Lynne?
Definitely.
So we spent a day bringing together all of the bits and pieces. So we did new ID badges for everybody. We did personalized water bottles for everybody. And Lynne absolutely buys into our values as well, that we don't just want to create tap that will end up in landfills. So everything we produced had a reason for being. We did mugs, and we went around the kitchen swapping out all the mugs. We did metal water bottles which had names on. It was really, really good. And so every staff member, when they came in on that day, and this was during COVID, or just as people were getting back to work, they all had different times to come in, but they got their own named bag with their own ID badge on, with their own water bottle in, with a pin badge, with their own business cards if they needed business cards. We pre-printed everything for people. So they really felt from day one that they could take ownership. And did that go down well, Lynne?
Definitely. From that buy-in, it was great to sort of get a goodie bag. The bag's fantastic. It is a really decent quality one, so you can use it to get all your shopping in. And it was just a really nice way to see everybody and to people to feel involved in that process, which is the best that we could do in the middle of a pandemic. So it wasn't quite the launch that we originally had planned before the pandemic hit us, but it was an excellent way of it, with the constraints we had, of making sure those staff were involved in the process. And it, you know, everyone's still using their water bottles now.
Excellent.
And you know, the leaflets are here, and we take those out when we're visiting people, but we've also got that as a PDF, so we can email it to people as well. Yeah, so it's great, and we tried not to give them anything that they wouldn't need, so there's not a stress ball in sight there, because nobody gets stressed because everyone's so positive and happy.
And we'd also rebranded the office, so even them arriving at the office was a bit of a shock. And you know, it's a good chance to do what you've always wanted to do. So Cheshire Centre for Independent Living, you have other people in the building with you that you rent space to. It was a chance to put a proper sign up to give them some promo as well. And the reception went from this to this, so much more welcoming. Yeah, and you had a purple wall done all up to the second floor. It looks fabulous.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The website went from that, it actually went through a small iteration first, but that's now what the website looks like now. The social media now. This is a mock-up, because your name on there, Alison, are you there?
Yes, it's literally changed over this morning.
Have you done it?
Yes, I've done it this morning.
For Facebook to change the name. And I think, I don't know what the problem has been. I think it's been the word disability.
Yeah, I think Alison, it's been, so for a year we've been disability positive as the tag.
Yeah, it's the username.
But the name's been CCIL dash, and could only get it down to CCIL. That's the best that we could do. They were not accepting disability positive.
No.
Thankfully, JG got back on the case, and Alison has sorted it out. But I think they thought a brand new company had taken over because the word disability wasn't used in our previous name. So we've had to send proof over that we've changed our name from Cheshire Centre for Independent Living to Disability Positive. And then Facebook made a mistake and called it Disability P. And now they've updated it to Disability Positive. So it's only taken us a year.
It's been fine.
I just
well done, Alison. Well
Thank you.
done.
I just emailed Diane and told her, and she's like, yes, she said, you're a star with tenacity. I was like, I was not going to give up on getting that name change, even if I had to go and knock on Jeff Bezos's or whatever he's called's door.
Well, you're
No,
all,
is it
you're
Jeff
all,
Bezos?
as I said to Jo, you're all an absolutely fantastic bunch of humans. So I don't know what we'd do without you.
Oh, thank you. No, Alison is incredibly tenacious. If you want to do it was going to get done one way or another. So I'm really, really pleased that happened. But,
it was going to get done.
It's not been easy. And then after the launch, so you sort of do the run up to the launch, and you have the launch, but then kind of what happens afterwards, and that's all the kind of the nitty gritty of kind of making everything change over. You know, you'll be finding things with your existing name on for ages. I don't know if that was your experience, Lynne. It sort of goes on and on.
I think we did a pretty good job going around everywhere and binning everything, to be honest. And we tried to make sure that we'd updated the Live Well sites and various things that we'd be on. But yeah, there's always a danger that there's something that you forgot, and you have to really think of everything. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then
changing all the policies was interesting. I think I don't know what time I worked till, but updating all the policies the day before launch so that they all had disability positive on them and not Cheshire Centre for Independent Living. That was I'd start that sooner. That'd be the advice if you're going to rebrand. Start that process sooner because it takes ages.
Oh, yeah. And contracts and things, you know, you might have contracts with people because you were pitching for things, weren't you? Especially because it was delayed and you didn't know whether to pitch in the new name because it was going to be a 3-year contract or whether to pitch in the existing name. We had a lot of conversations about that as well.
Yeah, so I think in the end we applied for it in the new name because the contract wouldn't have started until the day after the launch. So we applied for it and then obviously just put a little note to explain it, and we only had that once because everything else we're able to deal with in either the old name or the new name and not have to do this kind of hybrid where it will be this until this date, but then after that we'll be changing. So yeah, there's all those little things, but it's great because, you know, for us JG Creative we're absolutely on hand and go, oh, we've got this weird one, what should we do about this? And that was just really helpful.
Fab. Thank you. And then in terms of evaluation, so we talked about return on investment, and there, you know, you can't necessarily put a monetary figure on the difference, but there are lots of things that you can look at to see what success looks like. So for example, your social media followers, and I'm not necessarily talking about numbers, I'm talking about the audience. So when you look at who your audience is that the audience that you want to attract, and has that changed from rebrand to afterwards? Same with Google Analytics, you can see how people are finding you. So if more people are coming from Google search, that's a really good thing because obviously your name or your descriptions are helping people to find you more. Telephone calls, so the number of calls you're getting, but also the quality. Do they know who you are before they pick up the phone? Is it easier for you to explain what it is that you do? And what's that kind of conversion like? So whether that's donors or whether that's clients or whether that's partners, how has that changed? If you send out email newsletters, the open rate, the number of new subscribers, you know, are people really getting that you're communicating more clearly? Same with new business. Are you being asked to pitch more? Are you winning more contracts? Are you putting together more useful partnerships, again because people have found you? And the same with donations. If you do individual giving or other forms of fundraising, then is that clarity of message helping people understand why you need support? Your sales or your number of new clients. I know like Disability Positive, they have clients who they offer services to, so you can see the difference and changes there. And any satisfaction surveys you do, any feedback you get, any reviews or referrals you get, not all of them are down to brand alone, but they're good free metrics to help you ensure that your investment has been successful. Is there anything else that you can think of there, Lynne, or anything that helped you, like Catherine said, obviously that's a great endorsement. Anything else like that helped you kind of prove, if you needed to, that it was the right thing to do?
Yeah, I suppose it'd just be useful. I was just comparing one impact review to the one just this year, so that kind of covers the launch period. But in 2020, in our 2020 report, we had 11,041 unique visits to our website. In our impact review in 2021, we had 42,287 unique views to our website. What a difference. I'm really pleased that that's a lot to do with the social model of disability page, because people go to that to look at the examples that we've got, because we actually gave examples on there about, for a deaf person or someone on the autistic spectrum, so that we could show how the social model might apply to different impairments to kind of educate people around the barriers that are in society. And that's, we've gone up from about an average number of visits of 3,400 to 6,800 a month on average. On social media, we've gone up from we've had a 15% increase in our social media engagement from 2020 to 2021. So again, that shows that actually how we're describing things and how we're doing the posts are getting people engaging much more. So I just thought that would be helpful. And I think just people understand who we are and what we do better, and our staff understand that better. And not to mention, it's much easier to write disability positive than it was Cheshire Centre for Independent Living over and over again. So it saves time as well. So it's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
I think I just want to point out with your website as well, we didn't do a brand new website at all.
No.
It was a very low cost solution. We restructured it. So we gave some advice on what should be on the homepage, what structure we might want to use, just so to help people find it. And then your guy who does the website just went ahead and made those changes. And the same with the brand, we just gave him the assets and an idea of what it should look like. So it was quite a low cost solution in terms of making changes. And I think that definitely helped. And the same with the with social media. I know Alison worked with Diane quite a bit just to upskill her on what would make really good social media engagement. And then she's flown with it. She's doing a brilliant job. So again, it's just with a small nudge in different areas, it can make a huge impact.
And I think just the final one, Jo, that I meant to mention was just in terms of the number of hours of support that we've provided to customers. Now, of course, this has been during a pandemic as well, and you've all noted that you've been busier. But just some indication, we went from delivering 59,000 support hours in 2020 to 147,000 support hours at the end of 2021. So I just thought there were a couple of interesting stats just to show it was worth it, even in the middle of a pandemic.
That is incredible. That's incredible. Thank you so much for feeding that back. That is brilliant. We have rattled through that quite quickly. Has anybody got any questions or comments that they want to ask? Kerry.
I just really wanted to echo what Catherine said earlier, actually, and congratulate you on such successful rebrand as a parent to 2 disabled children. If I'd have seen the Centre for Independent Living, I just at the Cheshire Centre, I just wouldn't have paid any attention. But actually, as soon as I came on this group, and we haven't met before, and I saw the name on your Zoom little window that said disability positive, it instantly made me think, oh, disability positive, I've not come across that one before, on what's that all about, and then had a very sneaky look at your website before Jo put it up whilst you were chatting. So yeah, just want to say I thought it looked fabulous.
Great, thanks.
It's a really, really useful session. Thank you.
Fab. If there's no, oh yes.
Yeah, I just want to say that I mean, I think the rebrand is great. That what makes the big difference for me are those, is it 6 little figures?
Yeah.
And how you've portrayed them, and the use of those You know, I can see in any kind of application, you've got them on the Facebook page today. I just think they're remarkable, you know, genius idea.
And we're very keen for people to download those, put them on your material, you know, use that instead of the man in the wheelchair if you can. Lynne, that is a gift from Disability Positive to the world. We want to see them everywhere.
Yeah, fabulous. Love them.
Catherine, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, I just, if you don't mind, Jo, I would just very quickly like to talk about our experience of working with you, if you don't mind, because we're that sounds quite ominous. It isn't. I just wanted to say, so obviously Jo alluded to the fact we're going through this exercise right now. We're a very small charity, so we're in a completely different place. We needed to rebrand, change our logo because it was dated, so it was driven by design really. And Jo has taken us in 6 months, I don't know if you can see, from that to that. And it's been seamless. It has been absolutely seamless. And Jo and the team have helped us understand things about fonts that we didn't know. I mean, we're a tiny charity. There's what, 3 of us who don't work with the children, and we're doing everything. We're like jacks of all trades and masters of none almost. And help us understand about fonts and the sort of colours we should be using and why we should have picked those colours and the sorts of photography we should have and how to take all that and just update the whole Peter Pan look to take us going forwards. Oh, there we are. So what actually happened, that logo I think was designed when the charity changed from the Peter Pan nursery to the Peter Pan Centre about 15 years ago, and have been with us ever since. And marketing was never at the top of anyone's priority list. We're always very busy, like you guys always say, you know, referrals and so on. And so marketing, no money to spend. But actually this logo was becoming really expensive to print and stuff.
And embroider.
And embroider and all those kind of things. And like Jo said, we actually, a friend of the previous centre manager had designed the Tinkerbell, and it was that I went to Jo with that image and I said, we've got this, we love it, but I don't know what to do with it. And that's what Jo did. And here we go.
I did
Here are the
force you
bags.
to change the strap line from that font I didn't like though. Oh,
Yes,
cool.
you did. The bags are amazing.
Let me stop sharing. Sorry.
Yeah, the bags are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you did. You changed the font and changed. I remember you said the P's weren't the right shape and all those little things.
It was Comic Sans, and I just couldn't live with myself.
I agree with that, Catherine, about the font, because we use Verdana now, and who knew? You know, who knew? Because all we'd ever used was kind of Arial, to be honest. So it's just amazing, like there's a whole world of fonts out there. But Verdana is fantastic. Yeah.
And also, you created a brand kit in Canva, and as a small charity, we do everything ourselves in-house on Canva, and it's just professionalized the whole lot. You created everything, uploaded it, the brand guidelines, put some templates in there, and now it's so easy and less time consuming as well for us to create all that stuff. So yeah, I'm honestly not being paid to sort of shout Jo's.
Thank you. And honestly, I had nothing to do with Peter Pan. Nikki and Megan, that is all them, and they've done an amazing job. And yeah, Canva is free for charities. Please get Canva Pro. I was sniffy about it for years, but it's brilliant. It's really good. Alison uses it all the time, don't you, for everybody. The only other thing I was going to do a little self-plug, not that I feel like I need to now, but just to let you know, we have a whole load of blogs, which if you're interested in learning more about branding, they're quite good. We quite enjoy writing them. Andrea's written a few which are fabulous, but yeah, from A is for authenticity, I think we're through to Q at the moment, which we did a little brand quiz to see if you had been picking up on the right things, but they're always really short. We send them out once a fortnight on our newsletter, and they're on our website as well. But if you're interested in branding, or if there's anything in particular you want to talk about, because when I was doing the evaluation one, I'm like, I'm sure I've written this before. And there is an I is for investment one that talks about the kind of financial outlay and what you'll get back from it. And that's quite interesting. And if you do have to ever convince anybody of the reason for doing it, it's quite an interesting one to read.